Good evening. Tonight, what I'm about to share with you is a story that has been hidden, obscured, and deliberately forgotten for over a century. It's a story about how millions died, not from natural disasters, but from calculated policies, and how those deaths changed the very DNA of an entire population. Tonight, we connect the dots between history and science, between colonial extraction and modern disease, between the famines of the 1770s and the diabetes epidemic of 2026. This is the untold story of how British rule didn't just impoverish Bharat, it altered the biology of Hindus for generations to come. I'm going to take you through 31 major famines, and I'm going to show you the policies that caused them. I'm going to introduce you to groundbreaking epigenetic research, and I'm going to reveal a solution rooted in ancient wisdom and validated by modern science, offered today by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam. This is investigative journalism meets molecular biology, history meets health. Prepare to see the world differently. Let's begin with the numbers. And the numbers that I am going to share with you will shock you. To begin, during the 190 years of British colonial rule, from 1765 to 1947, Bharat experienced 31 major famines. In the 2000 years before British arrival, historical records show only 17 famines. The British period nearly doubled the famine frequency in 1/10 of the time. Now let's walk through the deadliest ones, decade by decade. We begin in 1770. The British East India Company had just gained connection rights, the Diwani, over Bengal in 1765. Within 5 years, they precipitated the Great Bengal Famine. The death toll, 10 million people. That's 1/3 of Bengal's entire population. According to research from the University of Alabama, published in Genocide or Disaster in 2024, this famine resulted directly from British tax policies, not just natural drought. In fact, many researchers have shown that it wasn't natural drought at all. And here's what happened. The East India Company forced farmers to abandon food crops to grow indigo and opium, cash crops for export. When the drought hit in 1765, there was no food to buffer. But did the company reduce taxes? No. They actually increased land revenue by 10% during the famine. Now let that sink in. 10 million people are dying, and the British response is pay more taxes. The company collected 1.47 million in revenue during 1770 to 71, even as corpses lined the streets. As documented in research by environmental historian Chris Hall in the Great Bengal Famine of 1770 and the Boston Tea Party, news of this famine traveled to the American colonies and contributed to the anti-British sentiment that led to American Revolution. Fast forward to 1783 to 1784, the KAILASA famine struck northern India. Death toll, 11 million people. Then came the Dojibara famine of 1791 to 1792, also called the Skull Famine, because skulls literally lined the Deccan landscape. Another 11 million deaths in Hyderabad, the southern Maratha kingdom, and the Deccan region. According to several different commission reports, which compiles data from several different sources, these two famines alone killed 22 million people in just 9 years. That is the entire population of Australia today. The 1800s brought no reprieve. In 1837 to 1838, the Agra famine killed 800,000 people across 25,000 square miles, affecting a total number of 8 million people. Then the Upper Doab famine of 1860 to 1861, the death toll, 2 million people. The famine affected the Ganga, Yamuna, Doab, Rohilkhand, Awadh, and parts of Punjab. And here's where it gets particularly unconscionable. The Orissa famine of 1866. 1 million people died, and during this famine, as even BBC had reported in their 2016 report, how British let 1 million Indians die in the famine, Britain exported 200 million pounds of rice from Bharat to England. Let me repeat that. 200 million pounds of grain left Bharat while 1 million Hindus starved to death. This wasn't famine. Britain's legacy is next. Now we come to perhaps the most well-documented and deadliest, the Great Famine of 1876, also called the Madras Famine. The death toll goes from 5.6 to 9.6 million people, with modern demographic estimates placing it at 8.2 million fatalities. To put this in perspective, that's more than the entire population of Switzerland today. This famine affected an area of 670,000 square kilometers, larger than the country of France. It caused distress to 58 million people. And who was in charge? Lord Lytton, Viceroy of India from 1876 to 1880. His policies during this famine revealed the utter contempt of British officials for Hindu lives. Lytton was committed to laissez-faire economics, the belief that the government should not interfere in the free market. Even as millions starved, he opposed famine relief, calling it interference with natural market forces. According to a 2023 research paper called Laissez-faire Ideology and Famine in Colonial Bharat, the economist Tirthankar Roy Lytton appointed Sir Richard Temple as famine commissioner. Temple instituted what became known as the Temple wage, a policy so cruel it defies logic. The Temple wage mandated that starving people perform hard manual labor, building roads, digging canals, for 8 to 10 hours a day in exchange for just a ration of 1 pound of grain. That's roughly 450 calories per day. Temple himself wrote that the relief ration should be set at a level that will not produce death, not prevent suffering, not restore health, just barely keep people alive. This became the template for future famine policies, and it killed millions. And here's the obscenity. While millions died, Lytton spent 5 million pounds, which is equivalent to billions today, on the Delhi Darbar of 1877. This was a lavish ceremony to proclaim Queen Victoria as the Empress of India. Fireworks, feasts, military parades, while skeletal bodies littered the streets 1,000 miles south. During this famine, as documented in the official statistics, Lord Lytton oversaw the export of a record of 6.4 million hundredweight of grain from Bharat to Britain. The regular export of grain continued unabated even as famine peaked. And one official noted, "We have a surplus of grain, but the people are too poor to buy it. The food existed, but Hindus just couldn't afford it." The horror of 1876 to 1878 led to the Indian Famine Commission of 1880 and the creation of the Indian Famine Codes of 1883. These codes classified situations of food scarcity according to the scale of intensity and laid out a series of steps that governments were obligated to take in the event of a famine. This sounds progressive, right? Wrong. The famine codes still adhered to laissez-faire principles. They mandated minimal intervention. Relief was contingent on labor, and they explicitly prohibited excessive spending on famine relief. The underlying philosophy remained: let the market work. Don't create dependency. And as research from History Association of the United Kingdom shows, these codes were more about managing British reputation than saving Hindu lives. Did the famine codes work? Judge for yourself. According to several contemporary British estimates, the death toll was placed around 1 million. But later, demographic research by historian Tirthankar Roy, man-made, suggests that between 4.5 and 5 million people died. At least 1 million deaths also happened in the famines of 1899 to 1900. According to Thoughtco's historical analysis, the famine of 1899 to 1900 in Bharat caused an estimated 9 million deaths due to crop failure. The British officials provided little help during this disaster. Lord Curzon was a viceroy during the 1899 to 1900 famine. According to research by the Restore Trust organization in 2023, while Curzon did spend money on famine relief, 6.5 million in 1899 and 1900, the mortality rate in the Madras presidency during this famine hit 37.9 deaths per 1,000 people, the highest mortality among all famines between 1876 and 1819. And finally, we reach 1943, just 4 years before the independence of India, the Bengal famine. Multiple academic sources have estimated 800,000 to 3.8 million people died from starvation, malaria, and diseases aggregated by malnutrition. The most careful demographic estimate, 3 million deaths. This famine was different. There was no study that showed that it was remotely caused by drought. A 2019 study published in Geophysical Research Letters and reported by The Guardian found that rainfall and soil moisture were actually above average in 1943. In this case, Churchill's policies contributed directly to this famine. Madhushree Mukherjee's groundbreaking report in 2010 called Churchill's Secret War documents how Churchill diverted food away from Bengal to build stockpiles for British troops and post-war Europe. A 2022 study published in the Public Library of Science concludes that British wartime policies, lack of healthcare, and continued grain exports all contributed to the catastrophe. Churchill's own words condemn him. When the Secretary of State for India, Leopold Amery, informed him of the famine, Churchill responded, "I hate Hindus. They are a beastly people with a beastly religion." So now what is the total? How many Hindus died during the famine during the British rules? Conservative estimates from the Famine Commission reports and demographic studies give it at 55 to 60 million people who died from starvation and famine-related causes between 1765 and 1947. But more research suggests that the number is far higher. A 2022 study by the economic historians Jason Hickel and Dylan Sullivan, published in the journal World Development, estimates that 165 million excess deaths occurred in Bharat between 1880 and 1920 alone, when adjusted for mortality rates. This is not just history. This is one of the largest genocides in human history, and it is being systematically erased from textbooks, from global consciousness, and from collective memory. But history always leaves evidence, and in this case, the evidence is written in our DNA. We've just walked through 31 famines, 190 years of starvation, and at least 55 million deaths. Now comes the question, why does this matter today? Because this famine didn't just kill people, it changed the survivors at the molecular level through a process called epigenetics. Epigenetics literally means above the genome. It's a study of how your environment and experiences can change how your genes work without changing the DNA sequence itself. Think of your DNA as hardware, the fixed code you inherit. Epigenetics is a software, the settings that determine which genes got turned on or off. And here's the crucial part. These settings can be passed down to your children. For centuries, we believed that inheritance was purely genetic. You get your mom's eyes and your dad's height. But epigenetics shows us that you can also inherit your grandmother's starvation, your grandfather's trauma, encoded in chemical tags in your DNA. The most famous proof of this comes from the Netherlands. During World War II, from November 1944 to May 1945, the Germans imposed a blockade on the Western Netherlands. Food supplies plummeted. For months, people starved on just 400 to 800 calories per day, less than a quarter of a normal intake. This period is known as the Dutch hunger winter, and it became one of the most important natural experiments in human genetics. That is, if you can call it natural. Starting in 2008, a team led by Dr. Bastian Hegemans at Leiden University began studying the children born to the mothers who were pregnant during the famine. The results were published in the prestigious journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The landmark study is titled Persistent Epigenetic Differences Associated with Prenatal Exposure to Famine in Humans. This paper has been cited nearly 4,000 times, making it one of the most influential studies in epigenetics. Here's what they found. 6 decades later, 60 years after the famine, people who were in utero during the Dutch hunger winter showed a persistent change in DNA methylation at a gene called IGF-2. IGF-2 stands for insulin-like growth factor 2. It's crucial for growth, metabolism, and how your body handles glucose and fat. The study found that famine-exposed individuals had less DNA methylation at the IGF-2 gene compared to their unexposed siblings. This means that a few months of maternal starvation created a molecular change that lasted a lifetime. Changes that affected metabolism, disease risk, and how the body stores fat. A follow-up study published in Nature Communications in 2014 expanded the findings. The researchers identified multiple genes affected by prenatal famine exposure. And it wasn't just the children, the grandchildren of the Dutch hunger winter survivors, people who never experienced starvation themselves, have twice the risk of hyperglycemia compared to those whose families weren't affected. According to a 2018 study called Science Advances, these epigenetic changes mediate the link between famine and metabolic disease across generations. So the Dutch experienced one famine lasting 6 months, and the epigenetic effects are detectable 3 generations later. Now imagine 31 famines over 190 years. Generation after generation of Hindus experiencing starvation. What would that do to a population's DNA? South Asians, people from Bharat, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, have what researchers call a unique metabolic phenotype, and it is killing them. According to prestigious Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, a study shows that South Asians have higher body fat percentage at a same BMI as Europeans, more visceral adipose tissue, the dangerous fat around organs, and less muscle mass, and finally, greater insulin resistance. This is called the thin fat phenotype. A South Asian person can look thin, but have a body composition and metabolic profile of someone obese. A 2025 study just published in Frontiers in Endocrinology provides the most comprehensive review yet. The researchers found that the South Asians developed type 2 diabetes at younger ages, at lower BMI levels, and with more severe complications than any other ethnic group. The civilization that was once Bharat has now 77 million diabetics, earning the unfortunate title of diabetes capital of the world. Why? The leading hypothesis is starvation could be consequence of epigenetic effects exacerbated during the colonial era. Famines resulted in a unique starvation adaptive phenotype characterized by increased fat storage and insulin resistance. Let's break down what this means. When populations face repeated famines, evolutionary pressure favors those whose bodies are extremely efficient at storing every calorie of fat. Because in times of starvation, stored fat equals survival. This creates what's called the thrifty phenotype. Your body becomes miserly with energy expenditure and generous with fat storage. Your metabolism slows down, your insulin sensitivity decreases. All of this helped our ancestors survive famines. But here's the cruel irony. In times of abundance, these same adaptations become deadly. The traits that helped your great-grandmother survive the Bengal famine now predispose you to diabetes, heart disease, and stroke. According to a 2023 article in Scientia News, Dr. Arjuna Said explains South Asians have endured numerous famines, have inherited starvation adapted traits characterized by increased fat storage, and as a result, the risk of cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and obesity is heightened in their descendants. A 2025 article in Brown History notes studies found that the grandchildren of famine survivors had twice the risk of hyperglycemia compared to those whose families didn't live through famines. And here is where it becomes even more insidious than it already is. The 2025 research paper from the Juggernaut documents that British-induced starvation didn't just kill millions, it rewired bodies for generations. The article states, new epigenetic research shows that British-induced starvation didn't just kill millions, it rewired bodies for generations. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't theory. Multiple peer-reviewed studies from institutions like Oxford, Harvard, Stanford, and leading research centers all point to the same conclusion. The colonial famines altered South Asian metabolism at the epigenetic level, and those changes persist today. So when you see statistics like South Asians have 4 times the risk of diabetes, or heart attacks occur 10 years earlier in Hindus, this isn't just genetics or lifestyle. This is intergenerational trauma encoded in DNA. It's the molecular legacy of colonial extraction, the biological cost of the British Raj. Now the most important question. Can we reverse these epigenetic changes? Can we heal the molecular wounds of ancestral famine? The answer is yes, and the solution comes from an unexpected source: fasting. Now I'm going to show you how famine actually can be reversed through controlled fasting. It sounds paradoxical, but because our ancestors starved involuntarily, and now we're recommending voluntary fasting. What is the difference? The difference is control, duration, and metabolic state, predictable, and activates healing pathways. The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Nityananda, reversing the effects of the famines that our ancestors went through. The key mechanism is a process called autophagy. Autophagy is your own body's cellular recycling program. During autophagy, cells break down damaged proteins, dysfunctional organelles, and accumulated waste, and then recycle them into new functional components. According to Dr. Mark Mattson, neuroscientist at Johns Hopkins University and the National Institute on Aging, intermittent fasting is one of the most powerful triggers of autophagy. Dr. Mattson's seminal 2017 review article published in Aging Research Reviews has been cited over 2,000 times. He writes, intermittent fasting has profound beneficial effects on many different indices of health and can counteract disease and processes. The article details how fasting triggers what's called metabolic switching. The body shifts from using glucose as its primary fuel to using ketones derived from fat. This switch activates multiple beneficial pathways. One crucial pathway involves mTOR, mammalian target of rapamycin, and AMPK, which stands for AMP activated protein kinase. These are master regulators of cellular metabolism and aging. When you're constantly eating, mTOR is active, signaling growth, protein synthesis, and cell division. But high mTOR activity suppresses autophagy. When you fast, mTOR activity decreases and AMPK increases. This triggers autophagy. When you fast, mTOR activity decreases and AMPK increases. This triggers autophagy. According to a 2023 review in Bioscience Trends, fasting activates autophagy through the AMPK-mTOR pathway. A 2025 study in Nutrition and Metabolism stated that short-term fasting induces autophagy through these pathways. But autophagy is just the beginning. Fasting has effects throughout the body. Remember those epigenetic tags, the chemical markers that got altered by ancestral famine? Fasting can change them back. A groundbreaking 2020 study from the University of Illinois, published in the journal Cell Biology and reported by the university's news service, found what they called a fasting-induced epigenetic pathway that promotes autophagy and lipid degradation. Researcher, Professor Jong-Suk Kim, stated, "This is the first study to show that fasting can induce epigenetic changes that activate autophagy. The pathway works by modifying histone proteins, the spools around which DNA wraps." A 2020-25 comprehensive review in Dergy Park Journal states, evidence indicates that intermittent fasting can enhance lipid and glucose metabolism, support healthy aging, reduce inflammation, and improve mitochondrial and immune function by modulating gene expression epigenetically. Multiple studies now show that fasting affects DNA methylation patterns, the same type of epigenetic modification altered by the Dutch hunger, winter, and the colonial famines. A 2020 study in Aging journal found that specific interventions, including intermittent fasting, may reverse epigenetic aging. This is the first randomized control study to show how we can turn back the epigenetic clock. According to 2025 review in Endocrine Reviews, fasting-mediated changes to the epigenome provides a mechanism for sustained metabolic reprogramming. So now let's get down to it. But does fasting actually improve the specific problems that South Asians face? Insulin resistance, visceral fat, and metabolic syndrome. Yes, overwhelmingly yes. Dr. Walter Longo at the University of Southern California has pioneered research on fasting mimicking diets. His 2015 study shows that periodic fasting reduces visceral fat, improves insulin sensitivity, lowers IGF-1, remember that's the growth factor affected by famine exposure, and finally reduces inflammation. A 2024 randomized controlled trial published in Nature Communications Digital Medicine found that time-restricted eating in adults with metabolic syndrome led to significant improvements in blood sugar control, insulin resistance measured by HOMA-IR, and blood pressure and cholesterol levels. During Dr. Sachidananda Panda at the Salk University has shown that time-restricted eating consuming all meals within an 8 to 12 hour window reshapes gene expression throughout the body. His 2018 study in cell metabolism demonstrates that the timing of your eating matters as much as what you eat. A 2022 review in Endocrine Reviews also states that time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting can prevent and manage metabolic disease by improving insulin sensitivity, reducing inflammation, and promoting autophagy. Specifically for insulin resistance, the core problem in South Asians, a 2023 meta-analysis in Frontiers in Nutrition found that intermittent fasting significantly improves insulin sensitivity independent of weight loss. A 2024 study in BMC Nutrition confirms that fasting decreased total cholesterol, the LDL levels, and triglycerides, improves the blood pressure, reduces abdominal fat, and enhances mitochondrial function. For South Asians specifically, a 2020 study examining insulin resistance found that exposure to famine in early life was strongly associated with beta cell dysfunction and insulin resistance in adulthood. The implication: now we know that fasting may specifically help reverse the metabolic damage caused by ancestral famine exposure. Now, what is a practical application? The Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism recommends fasting 1 day per week. And in fact, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has revived an ancient technique known as Nirahara Samyama. With an initiation from an incarnation, this beautifully led intermittent fasting program with spiritual aspects as well has produced profound results. The research supports this. Studies shows that 16 to 24 hours fasts activate autophagy. Weekly fasting provides metabolic benefits without excessive stress, and consistency matters more than duration. Regular weekly fasting is more beneficial than occasional long fasts. According to Dr. Matson's research, people who fast for at least 14 to 16 hours experience improvements in sleep quality, energy levels, mental clarity, and metabolic markers. And critically for South Asians, multiple studies show fasting improves insulin sensitivity, reduces visceral fat, and enhances metabolic health, targeting exactly the dysfunctions created by ancestral famine. Now let's collect all of the threads that we have created. Over the last 45 minutes, we have covered the 31 major famines that happened in Bharat. These famines killed an estimated 55 to 165 million people, one of the largest genocides in human history. The survivors of these famines developed epigenetic adaptations, changes in the DNA methylation and gene expression that helped them survive starvation, and these changes were passed down through generations. Today, the epigenetic modifications manifest as thin fat phenotype, insulin resistance, and heightened risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease. What was once Bharat is now the diabetes capital of the world, with 77 million diabetics. But there is a message of hope. Epigenetic changes are reversible. Unlike DNA mutations, epigenetic modifications can be altered through lifestyle interventions. Controlled voluntary fasting, particularly 1 day per week, as prescribed by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, activates autophagy, reprograms metabolism, improves insulin sensitivity, and can reverse epigenetic damage. This isn't just a spiritual practice. It's molecular medicine. It's epigenetic healing. It's taking back control of our biology from the colonial legacy encoded in our DNA. When we fast, we're not starving. We are signaling to ourselves that you are safe now. You can let go of the survival programming. You can heal. This is how we break the cycle. This is how we transform intergenerational trauma into intergenerational healing. The British may have altered our DNA through 190 years of extraction and starvation, but we have the power through conscious, controlled fasting to rewrite our epigenetic code. From the famines of 1770 to the diabetes epidemic of 2026, from colonial policy to molecular biology, from inherited trauma to conscious healing. This is the story they didn't want you to know. The story that's hidden from history books and encoded in our DNA. But now you know, and knowledge is the first step to healing. Thank you for watching this special investigation. Remember, your health is not just your own. For more information and to sign up for a special program which includes all training in spiritual level and initiation from the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism himself, scan the QR code now. Remember to like, subscribe this channel for more from KAILASA News. Thank you for watching and good night.